Sometimes I have people who wonder, how should we address political issues or social issues within a church? Actually, we already know how to do that, and we do it all the time when we're addressing issues of personal morality. So there are some issues of personal morality that the Bible's very specific about. We have to be very specific about. If someone says, should I leave my spouse for someone else because I found my soulmate? No. We have a clear answer and word from God on that. There are going to be other issues where we deal with principles, but we don't deal with specifics. So I'm not going to tell a single guy in my church who he should marry, but I'll give him general biblical principles about how to find a wife, about what sort of woman he should be looking for, and so forth. And then there are going to be other issues that we don't address at all. We can have Romans 14 kinds of disagreements about them. And so one family may homeschool, another family has their kid in public school, another family in a Christian school. We don't divide up and fight over those things. I think the same thing is the case when we deal with issues that we define as political or social or what have you. Some things the Bible speaks very definitively to, and we have to. So if you're in 19th century Burma and you have an issue of widows being burned on the funeral pyres of their husbands, you can't say that's a political issue, I'm not going to touch it. You have to speak to that and say this is wrong. And if you do this, you're violating the law of God. You're going to have to answer for that at the judgment seat of Christ. If you're in 19th century America and you don't speak to the issue of human slavery because you say, well, that's political, then you're leaving people's consciences burdened as they stand before the judgment seat, and you're not equipping them to be free from that. And the same thing is true in any given age with any given set of issues. We speak very clearly on those things. Other things we speak in terms of principles. We're called to care for the poor. We may have two people within our congregation who disagree about whether or not the minimum wage being raised is an effective way to help the poor. That's not an issue that we ought to adjudicate as a church. What we ought to deal with is if you have somebody who says we shouldn't raise the minimum wage because the poor are takers and parasites. Now that's a spiritual problem. It's not a spiritual problem if someone says, I'm afraid if we raise the minimum wage right now, it's going to lead to greater unemployment. That may be right or wrong, but it's not a spiritual problem. It's a principle, how do we get there sort of problem. And there are going to be other issues that are social and political that we don't address at all, where we can have multiple viewpoints within the body of Christ. There's nothing in the Bible that gives us an energy policy or how we ought to think about a balanced budget amendment or a line item veto or gun control or those sorts of issues, and we can agree to disagree within the body of Christ. So I think we know how to do that. We're just reluctant to do that because we put this artificial barrier between personal morality and social ethics in a way that the prophets, in the way that Jesus, in the way that James, they just don't.